Welcome back to our podcast on Solid Ground. My name is Joe Boyle, and I'm the social media specialist here at HelixCon. I'm joined by our president, Jay Silver, as well as our guest, Grant Krapf from Krapf Legal. Thanks, Grant, for coming back on today.
It's my pleasure. Yeah. Look forward to hopefully providing some information that's going to help homeowners.
Yeah, we really appreciate that.
Yeah, super excited to have Grant back on and share his wisdom and knowledge, and in the hopes that some of that information may help a homeowner in need right now, whether it's with this storm or possibly future storms. And again, just hoping to add some value and help some folks with it.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's get started. So what are the most common reasons insurance companies deny hurricane claims, and how can homeowners protect themselves against these denials before the storm even hits?
So protecting yourself actually starts long before the storm. And that starts with making sure you've got good coverage. You've got coverage that's appropriate for the type of construction that your home has, for the use of the home, if it's a rental versus your primary residence, and making sure that you don't have election to repair rights on behalf of the carrier that you decide to go with, and that also helps you, stay in control of your own claim in the event that you do have one. So making sure that your application that you complete for the insurance that you want is accurate, and making sure that the insurance that you ultimately obtain isn't necessarily just the cheapest insurance, but it's the insurance that you can be confident in, that you can rely on in the event that you have any claim, whether it's hurricane or something that's unforeseen.
Right.
And so flushing out those issues with your insurance agent is important. And I think a lot of times people just click the renew button, send in the renewal payment. They don't pay attention to the notices where insurance companies are adding endorsements that exclude or limit your rights, so that when the claim hits and they go, well, we're not going to pay for that, or we're only going to pay for 1%, you're going to say 1%. Well, that's not going to help me very much, but it's too late at that point. So Everybody needs to be aware of what insurance coverage they have in Florida. And that, obviously starts at the time that you purchase it. So vet it with a licensed insurance adjuster, get a couple quotes, get a couple different ideas from different people. And like anything, I would recommend you go with referral related referrals. Go with people that, are known in the community, have a good reputation in the community, and not just, a pop-up on your news feed.
And you're referring to finding yourself a trusted advisor for your insurance, an insurance agent that can guide you into the correct policy for your particular situation.
Yeah. A lot of people, when they get insurance, they're just thinking about what they have to do later that day, not necessarily what happens in the event that they're actually going to have to rely on it. So don't just gloss over, I need insurance, I have insurance, this, satisfies what my mortgage conditions are for insurance, and so I'm good to go. Yeah. Because you won't find out until later that maybe you aren't as protected as you thought you were.
Yeah. And for those listening in, that's kind of our idea for today is we're going to start out kind of how you can do things before the storm ever happens. And one is getting yourself a trusted insurance agent that understands your policy, that can get you into the right policy. And just in navigating a claim, getting the right policy is also a skill set. And if you don't do that every day, you can miss some things, or not dot an I or cross a T. And now you're in a kind of a difficult situation. And then I think we're going to go into some things of once the storm happens, we'd like to just share basics on how you can maximize your claim. And, Grant is an expert on his firm, and the team does a phenomenal job at inventorying and documentation. And he'll share how important and really critical those things are to maximizing your claim and making it go smoothly without a lot of back and forth, and diving into, if we do have problems, how to address those denials from the insurance. If you're like a lot of homeowners, you're just sitting there like, man, I had all this. When is the insurance going to act? Can I start doing something now, at least to try to get back into my home? And what does that expose me to? Grant's going to dive in and kind of share, that as well with homeowners. Because I know there's a lot of people going through a lot of stress out there right now, a lot of unknowns, misinformation, and hopefully through this conversation today, we can bring some light on some simple things that you can do as a homeowner And then maybe there's some things that you, from hearing the advice, are like, wow, maybe I should get a professional on my side to make sure I really can maximize this and get back in here as fast as possible.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, never set yourself up for a denial. So make sure you got the coverage that you think you have, that you're accurate on your applications for the insurance. And then the number one thing is if you have a reasonable suspicion that there is damage that could be the basis of a claim, every homeowner, business owner with insurance has an obligation to promptly report the loss. So before the storm hits, know who you're going to call. And don't do what so many people do, that I have a little leak on my ceiling. Oh, it doesn't look that bad. Oh, I think I got a high deductible. Oh, I don't want to make a claim. Because if you don't promptly report it, you can, the carrier can validly deny your claim if they can prove, obviously, their prejudice in their investigation of it. But promptly reporting the loss is absolutely critical.
Wow.
It's almost having a written out game plan, because when you're under stress, a lot of things get forgotten, but a list of who to contact if something happens. So in the event, you've got your protocol, because I know you have some family and friends going through it as well right now, but yeah, a game plan up front makes a lot of sense to make sure, again, you're going through your checklist.
Yeah. So for example, in addition to promptly reporting, you want to document the damages that you're aware of. Particularly, I know a lot of Floridians are dealing with a lot of storm surge issues. And so documenting the flood line with a tape measure, not just on the exterior of the home, guys, on the interior of the home, in each and every room. It's going to help you so much easier later when if you want to get started, as so many people do, on their build back and their dry out, to prevent obviously damages, that could worsen. So, in addition, inventorying all of your contents, if you have content coverage, absolutely critical. A lot of people take all their stuff, they put it out by the street in a big pile. And as we've seen, man, people are coming by, they're scooping up the lawn chairs, they're scooping up the poly decks because, one chair is good, another chair legs broke, this and that and the other thing. You really got to document these things in the condition that they're in. Video is a great tool. Many people could just use your iPhones. You go through your house, you document everything in that condition. And that's before and after the storm.
Okay.
Before the storm. So that's part of your game plan.
Absolutely. When you get your insurance bill, and if you're paying, they're not going down in Florida, right?
Sure.
That's a great time before you shell out that $5-10 grand premium. That's your reminder. I need to document my house today. I just paid all that money. Guess what? I want to make sure if I got a loss, I'm going to get what I deserve under the policy. That day you pay your premium, take the 5 minutes, go around your house, in the closets, everywhere. Just do a full walk through your house to inventory everything. So in the event that you have a problem, I see when my policy renewed. I know I've got a video around that time. We can rely on it. And then after a storm like this, it's hard. But when you come back, don't just start tearing stuff up, okay? Get your phone out again, do the walkthrough. And if you're crying, that's fine. But just finish the walkthrough, get it done, get the claim reported, and then we get on with, the mitigation and rebuild.
Right.
So you recommended doing that that video survey every year when the renewal is for the insurance is good practice.
My wife's buying new rugs, buying new couches, it's like, things change, and so I just think that's a good standard practice for people to have.
Yeah, for sure. So what rights do homeowners have if their insurance company is stalling on paying out these claims? Because this can be stressful for them right now.
Yeah, it's absolutely stressful. Yeah. They did shorten the time that carriers have to pay claims from 90 to 60 days after the first notice of loss. Again, earlier, promptly report it. That's your first notice of loss. That gets the time ticking on the carrier's, evaluation and claims decision. So we want to obviously do what we can to get the most, benefits as quickly as possible. So having the policy, having it promptly reported, having your documentation, having your inventories, are all very important for that. And if the carrier is pushing you down the road, common tactics are not calling back, assigning multiple adjusters. I mean, many claims that I see have 5 or 6 different adjusters on them. These are hurdles that insurance companies put in the way of insureds to get a fair recovery, because some people just get frustrated. They start tearing apart their home, doing things themselves. You don't get paid for self-help. All of those things work in the carrier's favor. So don't take the bait. Hire professionals, out of the gate that are trained to document damage, are trained to test for mold, are trained to test the windows to see if the seals are broken, are trained to, have the claim fully evaluated and prepared to prove that a certain amount's owed. So it's never really too early to hire a professional in the claim context. They've got their lawyers waiting for you on the other end of the phone. So, I think having a lawyer, a good public adjuster, is also critical in the claims process to have those adjusters and those attorneys working for you, just as the carrier does working against you.
Yeah, that's essential.
Yeah, they have their attorneys, their adjusters, and their forensic engineers that play a role in these hurricane claims. And when a homeowner brings one of those in to evaluate damage, who are they acting on the behalf of? Typically, they're working for the insurance carrier, so all their experts. So
these are for-profit companies. How many law firms do you see with the names under the ice at the Lightning Stadium? Not many. They're making plenty of money. State Farm, look at the amount of advertising dollars and things that they spend, and they're making money because they're taking premiums and not paying the claims. And we don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But,
what role, Grant, do those forensic engineers and those experts? What role do they play in the hurricane insurance claims typically for the carrier?
Ideally, if everything's documented very well, it streamlines the claims process. Another common thing that I think is important if people have it are what we call, pre-purchase inspection reports are also very important because you can prove that the roof was in a certain condition, right? The insurance carrier accepted coverage of the roof in the condition it was. And so, it's important. One of the first things we have to do, in a contested claim is establish that the damage occurred during the policy period, right?
Okay.
Was there sudden accidental loss during the policy period? That's question usually number one. Right. And then we look to, did the insured comply with post-loss obligations? Was it promptly reported? Did they take measures to protect the property from further loss? Did they impair the carrier's ability to investigate the claim? And so, having your ducks in a row with those with that documentation and things is going to streamline the process, make it less likely that you get denied, or underpaid. And one other, and this is a good, sorry, just popped into my head, is, with these catastrophic events, open up a separate account. Organization is key on these things. So a lot of people are displaced.
Separate bank account.
So I just got some chills on this one because this is an old trick I learned a long time ago.
When you say account,
and I'm like, why didn't I think of that earlier? It's like 10 years ago. But
when you say account, you mean a separate bank account?
If you have the ability to have a separate credit card, you put all claim-related expenses on that account. Because you know what? The carrier is going to send you a request for information saying, give me all of the documentation you have relative to the claim expenses that you're seeking for alternate living expense or increased cost of living, eating out, right? Those things. Okay, guys and girls, if you have, this is my hurricane card and that's what you use, or maybe it's, maybe you're pulling on a separate line of credit or something to that effect. Everything is documented. That's your claim card. Okay. So use your claim card. And then later when the carrier says, give me all your claim related expenses, you're not like,
what do I do?
Well, I don't even know where all my statements are. And then you're trying to go through and you're trying to highlight and figure out, was this related or not? You go, bam, here's my statement. Now pay me.
Okay.
They're not used to that.
That's a good.
And so lighten your own load, by being prepared and knowing that they're going to request that information. And so be organized to just fire it right back at them and demand payment.
Gotcha.
And when you were talking on the forensic engineers, you were referring to the ones on your side, engineers that you've hired?
Forensic engineering.
So I was curious kind of how the forensic engineers that the insurance company sends out, what role do they play in this whole thing? Because I know that's they're pretty early on in the process after the adjuster comes out.
For lack of a better term, like insurance companies use their hired horse, to give the opinions that they know result in denials of claims, non-payment of claims. And that's why they only use 3 or 4 engineering companies, at any given time. And there's been a lot of things coming to light. I don't know who's been watching 60 Minutes, but with regard to insurance carriers changing, field adjuster reports, as well as, essentially defrauding, insureds. And so oftentimes if a carrier uses an engineer to opine that the damage is old or wear and tear or not something that was sudden and accidental, then we have to fight fire with fire and retain our own engineers, who may have a different opinion,
right?
And then you're into that disputed role.
So whether or not you're a homeowner that's managing this on your own, you're going to have to go out and find an engineer to be on your side to dispute what the carrier is saying, or just make it easy, hire an expert like Krapf Legal that has those engineers already on retainer to go out and do more of an unbiased evaluation of the damage.
My goal of this, what I'm trying to spread as far as an information standpoint is let's try to avoid the dispute, right?
Yeah.
And so disputes typically work in the carrier's favor because they're headquartered in, a lot of them are headquartered here, but the reality is they're not living with the problem, and the longer they hold your money, the more money they're making on it in their investments. And, the tables will show that the more likely the homeowner is willing to accept less later on, which works to their benefit, obviously. So don't get strung out, be prepared going into the claim.
Yeah. Right. Before we move on to the next one, just to touch on the delay, and you were saying about delaying calls and all those delay tactics, I assume the homeowner has to take very organized documentation of all of those delays that's occurring so that they can later
Nobody wants to hire, generally people don't want to hire attorneys. Like I get it. And so, another thing I would recommend that homeowners do, just like I said, establish this one account that you're going to call your hurricane card or your storm card or your water damage card, whatever, your lost fire card, whatever it is. Have a notebook, have something in front of you, a computer. And when you're on a call with your insurance carrier, document who it is you're talking to, how long the call lasted. Any specifics, relative to that. And then, oftentimes we'll call you back and then they don't, and then you have to call back in. Yeah. And that timeline later helps us as professionals in the event that you feel you need a professional, get you much better payouts quicker because we can call them on those things that they shouldn't be doing, adjusting claims, what we call in bad faith. And not, with due regard to the insurance interests. Those timelines are critical.
Right.
Yeah. I'm very glad Grant further clarified that because it is very important to document. Because if you just say, I've been calling and they're not calling me back, well, when and who did you talk to? It's
so like if you're like, kicking yourself, well, I didn't have an inventory of all my stuff when I renewed my premium, my policy renewed. I didn't document the damage before the storm. Never thought it would be this bad. Listen to me now. Start now.
Yeah.
Get your notepad, get your Word doc, start documenting and holding these insurance accountable, with us, essentially.
Right. So I know you mentioned, obviously, just taking documentation for pictures and things like that, but how can social media posts help or hurt a hurricane claim?
I've seen a lot over the years. It's like the personal injury context. You got a client with a back injury, and then next thing you know, she's jumping in the waves. But the reality is, a lot of people, I don't find it as prevalent in the first party insurance market, property damage losses relative to the social media things. There are pitfalls with social media. Oftentimes we settle these claims for confidential releases.
Right.
The carriers don't want us out there talking about how much money they paid and talking about their practices, that led to those settlements. There's a reason they're the ones conditioning confidentiality on the settlements, guys. Okay. And so, I've had you can't go and post, hey, Krapf was a great attorney. He got me $800,000 on this claim that, they offered me 10 on and, wahoo, don't do that. That would be a breach, of that confidentiality arrangement. which is really bad. But yeah, I mean, even issues relative to the documentation of the claim, if you're doing, a lot of tear out and self-help yourself, carriers generally don't have to pay for that. Just don't set yourself up on social media.
Right. That's a good point. So can homeowners hold their insurance company accountable for lowball offers? And how can they prove their property is worth more than what the company or insurance company suggests?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, particularly with storms, what we see are claims decisions that the value of the damage is below the deductible. Oh my gosh, what a coincidence. Over and over and over again. Rarely see straight denials on hurricane damage until you start getting to a 6-month, I didn't promptly report the claim issue, right? A year later, those tougher claims, oftentimes there's rational or good explanations that we can still argue and get coverage for under the policy. But, having, what was the question again?
Oh yeah, sure. So how can homeowners hold their insurance company accountable?
Yeah. So lowball offers again. I mean,
like where it's probably $100,000 worth of damage and they're given an offer of 10.
Yeah, there's a reason. Right. Yeah, my firm's recovered tens upon tens of millions of dollars for insureds. It's not because the claim was paid fairly, and it's not because they're just paying me to go away. It's because the claim was paid unfairly. Okay. They got caught with their hand in the cookie jar, because insurance carriers will typically see what they can get away with, and they place hurdles in front of people all along the claims process, because over time they find that people fall out and don't pursue the full and fair recovery that they probably should get, really, because they paid their premiums. And so again, hire professionals, hire them early. We call out insurance companies routinely through state filing, which homeowners can attempt to file themselves, but it's a little complicated to some degree, even though it was meant to be a consumer filing, and that's a civil remedy notice, which is filed through Department of Financial Services, a state agency that should be holding insurance companies accountable with the Office of Insurance Regulation. And so that timeline comes back to that. We routinely report out, catch carriers lowballing homeowners. It's probably one of the most common things we see in a storm. And, the reason is because the carriers perform a lopsided investigation. Would you ever hire a contractor to show up to your house and do a job that has no tools?
No.
I definitely would. Right. So I started this thing called #toolball_time. All right. Insurance company, you're sending somebody out to adjust my loss. They should have a water meter with them. Why? Because you can test to know if it's wet or not, right? Does it need to be removed? Does it need to be replaced? Mold test. Okay. May not tell us what the mold protocol is, but we can certainly ascertain whether or not additional testing and protocols, are warranted. That's to protect the health and safety of the insureds. Cougar boots to walk on the roof safely and not break tiles and things. There's a list of tools that I think every adjuster should have. And if you're going to hire a public adjuster and they don't have any tools with them, like water meters, ladders, that are capable of reaching, the areas that need to be accessed, maybe reconsider who you're working with. And if your insurance company's representatives don't have any of that stuff, get ready for a fight potentially, because I've seen a lot of carriers take the position, well, if we don't see it, we're not going to pay for it, which shifts the burden back to us to prove it up. So hiring professionals to deal with those lowball situations is important.
You mentioned burden and the burden of proof a lot. No, the burden of proof that falls onto the policyholder.
Well,
a lot of times, correct?
Originally the way it works is that the insurance carrier is charged with performing the investigation and telling you whether or not there's coverage, and if so, for how much and why. An explanation of benefits, right? But if they just say, hey, it's an old roof, wear and tear, or, that condition predated our, inception of our policy, we're not going to pay for it. Now
that's on me to show the burden of proof for that.
Yeah. The best offense is a great defense. So be prepared.
Okay.
And we can talk a little about the wind and water.
Sure. Yeah.
No, that's a big one with this storm.
Yeah, that's a big one for sure.
There was a ton of water, not as much so on the wind and the rain side.
Right.
But we're finding a lot more wind as the time's going by. Originally, obviously, the flood was extremely catastrophic. I, live out on the water. I mean, just, crazy, unprecedented, historic, almost biblical like type conditions on the Barrier Islands here on the West Coast, and things people haven't seen before. There's a lot of shock and awe with that. People aren't climbing around the roofs right away when there's 2 feet of sand in their kitchen. So, my teams and the people I'm working with, as they're out there evaluating the flood claims, we're getting those things filed. We're working towards maximum benefits of the flood claims with the flood insurance adjusters, consistent with those laws and ordinances, adjusting standards and things, coverages. They're performing routine inspections. So we're getting on more and more roofs, and we're finding areas, particularly Treasure Island, particularly Bradenton. There's pockets in Gainesville. There's, there is more and more wind coming out of the storm. People are saying it's not a huge wind event, but the reality is that I just don't think those damages are as obvious. And so that's another reason why this podcast is important, because just because you may not know about it right now doesn't mean that it's not there.
That's a good point.
You got major issues later because everything's kind of wet. Did it come from the windows that were damaged from some wind or flying debris? Did it come from the roof, where you had wind-related, peril-created openings, we call them, where water's coming in and coming down the walls? You may not know until you quote unquote dry out, do your cuts, and oh man, things are still getting wet from somewhere. Well, I didn't call in that wind claim, and here we are, right? 4 months later. Get professionals out to assess the situation. If you call my firm, we're going to send people out to do a full evaluation and look for all damages.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a good point for a homeowner, because most of them are doing the inspection on their own. They're not a professional home inspector. With a storm like this, if they did have, it was just some maybe floodwaters in the house, would you recommend they bring in a home inspector, professional, or some like a Barrel Engineering or some sort of firm to just do probably what, $200 to $500 just to do a.
I'm not going to speak for them.
I didn't even think of that until you brought that up about, because they're the ones doing they're assessing all the sand, and you got electrical, plumbing, potentially wind issues. There's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, it's like anything. How devastating would it be to put all this work in, maybe redo your floors, and then find out that your windows were shot. Now your floors are shot again. You maybe already signed a release, or something. There's no going back for more. So making sure that you inspect your home adequately after storms with professionals is critical, so that you can rest assured when you do your rebuild process, that home's buttoned up, it's ready for the next storm, and it's not going to fall apart, because a lot of the stuff is not obvious to the open eye. So like a lot of the adjusters we work with, they carry thermal imaging cameras. I don't know many people that have that at home.
Wow, yeah.
And they do this professionally. So you can actually take pictures and see, the temperature differences to know what's wet or not. It's critical, especially with kids and pets and, people's health and safety.
For sure. Yeah. So how does the wind versus water damage affect claims, though, and how can homeowners fight back if their claim is wrongly classified?
Yeah. So wind and water, wind's typically like your hurricane coverage.
Right.
Water, I assume you're talking about, surface water, flood waters, not covered under traditional, insurance that you have on the home.
I guess if you're being classified as water, but you feel it's wind. Almost if you feel you're not being classified correctly. Yeah,
this kind of goes back to having adequate inspections done to ascertain what is wind versus water. What is wind with an ensuing water loss, we call it, or and then ensuing mold losses on many occasions, versus what is strictly surface flood water covered by your flood policy. And so, detailed inspections on a case-by-case basis. Professionals reach opinions on those things, often aim to, maximize the benefits under the applicable policy.
Is there limits on the flood policy insurance? I heard, or is everyone different on flood insurance, or is there I heard, which probably is misinformation, that flood is capped at 250,000 or
a lot of times it's like Xerox, right? Like that's just a copy machine, but everybody calls it a Xerox kind of thing, or what have you. $250 is a standard flood policy for a lot of people. I just had a client the other day, has an $800,000 supplemental flood policy through a private insurer. Or there are other limits. It's always policy dependent. So again, work with professionals that can tell you at the purchase time, but also professionals like us after to ascertain what applicable coverages you have and what damages fall, under those respective policies and their coverage limits.
Right.
What about, out of curiosity, a lot of people on the news saw the electric car fires and the Tesla fire in the Davis Island garage. Is that something like that? Is that going to be covered? Like the part of the fire of the house? It's almost, it was caused by the storm surge water. So would that go under their flood? That was a very interesting one on what, now that we have a true expert on the show.
It's crazy.
For those that are probably interested, man, that Tesla fire, I wonder if they got insurance coverage for that thing.
I saw some wildfires. I couldn't fall asleep. I mean, I was up until 5 a.m. because I'm like with my kids there. Like, I'm not going to bed. My neighbors, like, I have 3 people on my street that have Teslas. I'm like, yo, we're going to wait this thing out, and so it was really scary. I mean, it was like a war. I mean, it still is a lot like a war zone out there. And so that's a unique question. Yeah. Oddly enough, normally there is coverage for fires that are triggered from floodwater under your normal hurricane policy, not the flood policy. And sometimes you read it, you're like, how am I going to get a fire from water? But yeah, the over voltage of the electrical current issues, and especially with the EV, the amount of EV vehicles and things we see on the roads today, more and more of a common problem. And just for your safety and the safety of others, before these storms hit, shut off your pool equipment, your breakers. If you're leaving the home, turn the power off, because man, did we see, I think as far as I can remember, an unprecedented number of these types of fires caused by electric issues. And man, it's just devastating because people, the responders can't get out there. They're risking their lives now. It just creates a whole problem. So making sure that the home is adequately protected, for the health and safety of not just yourself, but all of your neighbors and the emergency personnel is critical. But yeah, typically there is coverage under your policy, your hurricane policies for fires that ensue from the stormwaters.
Yeah, in Davis Island, it looked like a fireworks show with the transponders exploding and blowing up, and but
the number of blue flashes we saw that night,
and I bet you're going to see some policy law changes about these EVs in the car, and that they're responsible to get it out, or they would be denied coverage.
I don't doubt it.
Of a storm surge coming. Bet you that you're going to see some. Who knows?
I don't doubt it. Anytime there's something that's going to cost insurance companies more money, it wouldn't surprise me if there's going to be on the application, do you own an electric vehicle?
Yeah, right.
Because if you're in evacuation zone A, they may not be willing to write that coverage or put an exclusion in there, right? They're going to change policies. That's what happens.
EV fires due to flood or whatever.
How can we take money and not pay back? But
because I do know, and you're also a boat guy, that with RVs and boats and under your policy, you're required to make a strong effort to move that asset outside of the storm, or else you may be denied coverage. I heard of some folks up north losing their trailers, and they got denied because in their policy it said if a imminent storm is approaching, you're required to have a plan or to move that out of the path of destruction.
Right.
So another tip, if you have an RV, a boat, you may want to look at your policy language, which this was unprecedented. You saw boats up and lined up Treasure Island. I'm sure in your area you saw boats on all the barrier islands, Treasure Island, St. Pete, boats in the street.
And they're going to set you up from day one. Well, what was your plan on the recorded line? What do you mean? Most homeowners go, what do you mean? I didn't have a plan. Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. Well, if you hire a law firm or a representative to protect you, even in the claim reporting process, it's a smart move.
Yeah, that's a smart move.
Don't be what my dad say, an ounce of precaution is worth a pound of care.
So some people might be anxious about doing these kind of repairs. So should homeowners pay out of pocket for repairs before their insurance payout? And what are the risks of doing that? Just because they might be like too, angsty about trying to fix something.
Yeah. So the paying out of pocket is a bit of and it depends type scenario. It's obviously dependent on the damage, the needs of the family, the resources the family has. On a lot of disputed claims, so long as I have all my evidence documented with my experts that I'm going to need to hold the carrier accountable, doing the work to me, if they have the ability, is a great thing. It protects the property against further loss. I'm essentially a salesman in the courtroom, and now I've got a homeowner that replaced their roof because it wasn't repairable, because it needed to be replaced. This guy's not trying to win the insurance lottery, or get something that they otherwise shouldn't get. And it also sets the price of what it is. I know what my job is. It's to get my homeowners indemnified, and in those scenarios, it makes a lot of sense. So a lot of contractors I work, that refer us work and stuff, they know what's right. They know that the jobs need to get done. We advance the cost and the time associated with what we'll need to have to fight the carrier. But we don't want to hold up people's lives, right. and we want people to get back to this, with their kids to the schools that they're in and living in their homes and things. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have the means to do the work. That's why they had the insurance. And so, that's a sad situation we see far too often. And that's, again, why we're out here. Doing good for the hood and trying to help people.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. So this is more of a question, I guess, for the both of you. But how can homeowners avoid common contractor scams after a hurricane? Because that can be pretty prevalent. And what red flags should they look out for when signing repair contracts?
As the licensed contractor, I'll take that one. Yeah, you're going to have a lot of fly-by-nights, a lot of unlicensed contractor activity out there. Do yourself a favor, check. It's myfloridalicense.com. You can check their contractor license there. Make sure that they also have proper insurances in line. The worst thing that could happen, you have somebody that's unlicensed, no insurance, comes onto your property, gets injured, and now they're trying to file a lawsuit against you for, it could be down as bad as if they were handicapped. You may be responsible for paying for some of their expenses for the rest of their life. So just some simple documentation to check. Public record can kind of insulate you from that. Be very wary of paying out large deposits up front. Most contractors will accept 10 to 30%. If you're seeing any 50, 75% or all the money up front, I would be very, very leery. You can also check online reviews are a good source, whether that's Google. That's typically a good source of truth, whether this is not only a reputable contractor, but have they been in business more than a couple of years, or did they just, come out for storm chasing work, which, I'm sure there's some good people out there doing that, but make sure you protect yourself. Don't make a already difficult situation that you're going through even more difficult. So my advice there, check myfloridalicense.com, check reviews, make sure insurance is aligned, verify that insurance with their agency. There are cases I've heard of people creating fraudulent or fake insurance certification, certificate of insurance. So it always does make sense to follow up and verify. Those would be some of my takes.
Yeah, I think those are all great takes. And I think, going back to working with professionals in the industry, that this is what we do. Getting good referrals can save you a lot of headache in the long run. When you have the billions of dollars, it's like we need help from people in Miami and from other areas to rebuild. It's we want local. But sometimes it's tough because the local guys are so hurt themselves, or limited capacity for these catastrophic events. Just because people maybe from a different part of Florida, right, doesn't mean that they're not there to work with your best interests in heart. But to obviously vet and verify again, it is important.
For those folks that may have experienced foundation issues, maybe settling, shifting, could be from erosion from the storm surge. We've gotten a few of those calls. It's kind of like you said, it's too early to tell when you have 6 foot of sand inside your house. You're not as concerned about looking around the perimeter for some foundation cracks or settling at that point. Do flood policies cover that, or is that under the wind? Or
so it's always going to be factually dependent on what it is that, what it is that you're looking at dealing with. It goes back to dealing with professionals, again, that have the appropriate means to evaluate, damages, determine causation, wind, water, and then scope protocol issues, as a contractor, particularly for a lot of these low-lying areas that were built up in the 70s and 80s, FEMA requirements for damage to structures that have substantial damage. Typically meaning damage that exceeds 50% of the value of the improved structure. If you're not working with the right team, you may get permits denied later, and you may not have enough money to elevate your home, which you could potentially have coverage for under the law and ordinance provisions of your hurricane policies and things. So, just because someone dangles a carrot, be real careful before you eat it. You don't want to regret it later when it's too late.
That's a good point.
And so, foundational wise, when you rebuild, you got to rebuild in the right way so that when this happens again, and it probably will with the types of trends that we're seeing, with storms and the cycles the Earth's in. Or global warming, whatever you want to call it, guys. Storms are not going away. They've really only gotten worse year after year for as long as I've been doing this. And so, making sure that your build back is done right, consistent with the laws and ordinances, making sure that, insurance companies, when they are on the hook for those costs that you purchased, are paid. It's important and critical. And, we're gonna do it together. We're gonna rebuild Florida together here, and do it in the right way so that we get better at holding up to Mother Nature.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. That wraps up our podcast. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you, Grant, for joining us once again today. We really appreciate it. Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more exciting content like this, and we will see you next time. Take care.